Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions on the thing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome. And of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, click the notification bell on YouTube, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson back on the show. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing wonderful. It's a lovely 90-degree day in Austin, which is nice. Manchester United played today and we won. And I am watching The Mighty Ducks, which is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. This is all about The Mighty Ducks, the movie, which is basically, we kind of did it in a weird reverse order since we talked about the first episode of the new Disney Plus series, Mighty Ducks Game Changers, last week with Cameron. And I mentioned on last week's show that I had watched The Mighty Ducks as like just kind of like another thing to watch in addition to that show. And when you and I were sitting down and recording That News You Care About earlier this week, we talked about, hey, what do you want to do do you want to do anything for Disney Plus this week? And you were like, let's do Mighty Ducks. And I was like, I mean, I just talked about it, but yeah, I'm down to talk about more Mighty Ducks. So we won't need to necessarily dive too much into my history with Mighty Ducks because I covered a lot of that with Cameron last week. But I will say, I don't know if I really weighed in on this, but like one of the things that rewatching it now twice in the last week or so has really reinforced for me, as well as sitting down and actually doing like the trivia for the movie for this week's show, because last week I just kind of did a little bit of trivia for the TV show, is it's impressive. Like these movies, the trilogy, were all like very much kind of like a staple of my childhood, because this came out when I was like 7, so basically like 7 to 11, I think, is like the range of the movies for like my own life. But it's also really weird to think that I probably haven't thought about these movies much in the last 20 plus years. I certainly hadn't watched them or anything like that. And so coming into the series and this movie in particular, there are definitely elements that like happen in D2 and D3 that were just kind of like all blurred into my mind. So like the fact that like Kenan Thompson, for example, isn't even in this movie is one of those things that I'm like, oh, like I thought he was in that series from the beginning or something like that.
Jump.
And just elements like the Bash Brothers, the fact that that's not a thing until the next movie is just something that like was so ingrained in the series that I just thought it was like, I thought it was there from the jump. But yeah, let's talk about a little bit about your history with the Mighty Ducks, Logan.
Yeah, I love The Mighty Ducks. It's one of those movies to me where The Mighty Ducks came out in 1992, which was the year I was born, and I just love everything in 1992 because obviously I just like the year I was born, and so I've always had a weird affinity for things from that year. Even as like a kid, I just liked it, and so I remember watching this movie like. It is one of the like earliest film memories I have is watching The Mighty Ducks. Like, I was thinking about this a little bit, and like, I mean, I remember I might have had to have been like 3 or 4 years old when I first watched this movie. Like, I was young, and then after that, it was a staple of the '90s. Like, I've seen this movie, and the third one less so because I didn't really identify with that one as much. But like the first two, I've legitimately probably seen 2 or 3 dozen times. Like, I've seen these movies a lot. And one thing that I always liked about The Mighty Ducks, and like kids' movies, quote unquote, in general, or like kids' stories, whether it's like a TV show or movie or book or anything, are ones that take its audience, I think, seriously and treat them like they're not like just kind of dumb. And I think that Mighty Ducks is a movie that very much takes its kid audience very seriously, right? Like, it is a serious movie. It's got like dark themes in it. It's got tragic themes in it. And like, again, like we were talking about a little bit off air, like the fact that you don't even get introduced to the kids for the first like 10 or 15 minutes in the movie. Like, it's all about Gordon Bombay and like his whole arc and the flashback sequence with him, and then seeing his like high flying career with like the law firm now, and then the drunk driving incident. Like, I think these are just movies that respect the people who are watching them, the kids who are watching them, and I always like the fact that like it grows up with them, right? Like you get to see them grow and get older over time. So I've always really liked the movies, and it's always been one of my favorite series, right? Like when you say I haven't thought about it in 20 years, I've thought about the Mighty Ducks. I think about these movies at least once or twice a year. It helps the fact that like anytime I see the Mighty Ducks, the NHL team, I think of the movies, obviously.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Or the Anaheim, like the Ducks of Anaheim, whatever they
Yeah,
changed
the
their
Anaheim
name to,
Ducks.
something stupid, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I love this movie. It is legitimately one of my like favorite like kids movies from like my youth. So I was actually very excited to do this one. I actually didn't realize it was on D+. For whatever reason, I hadn't connected the dots that obviously the TV show would mean that the movies are also probably here. But I literally had not thought about it until this week, and I was like, oh shit, yeah, like they have the Mighty Ducks probably.
Yeah, they came. I want to say they came like around the holidays last year or something like that. They definitely have not been on Disney Plus the entire time.
That makes you feel a little bit
They
better,
definitely
so.
were like a late acquisition kind of thing. I think they had like some outstanding like deals with HBO
Like Indiana
or
Jones,
Amazon or
whatever
something like that.
eventually will
Yeah,
come.
exactly.
Yeah,
Those
okay.
kinds of things. You mentioning kind of you appreciate the darker themes. We'll talk about a little bit. There are definitely some weird slapsticky things that are that are not at all darker as well.
Yeah.
But one of the things I didn't pull it in originally as trivia, but you mentioning that, I wanted to kind of hop in and dive into this. One of the little bits of trivia is the original premise of the Mighty Ducks was much darker with very little comedy. It was about an ex-NHL player turned alcoholic who seeks revenge on his old coach by coaching opposite him. The main idea stayed when Disney bought the rights to the movie, but some elements were changed, such as Bombay is now a lawyer who never played in the NHL, who must do community service for a DUI. And there's much more emphasis on the comedy and downplaying most of the adult themes is kind of what it touches on. But it definitely has, it doesn't shy away from like the fact that Bombay is, a jerk at the beginning of the movie, or that, the whole kind of subplot of like Charlie's kind of broken homeness is it was very stereotypical a little bit. And we talk about it on last week's episode with Cameron, because the TV show has a similar kind of plot device in that you're the main, like the Lauren Graham mom character and the main kind of kid are another kid, like another family where the dad's not in the picture kind of thing. And the show even makes kind of a joke about it in that like she goes to explain it to another character and that character just turns on like a hot cocoa machine and completely drowns her out. So like she's telling the character like her, tragic backstory and why she's, a single parent raising this kid, but the audience just doesn't know that. And I don't know if it will eventually dive into those details or what, but it's very much kind of like tongue in cheek a little bit in like, hey, like you don't really need to know the ins and outs of this. It's the same kind of story you've heard a million times in these kinds of things. Dad either left or his dad or whatever the case may, like it doesn't matter. She's here. That's the important like parent that you should be focusing on. So I thought that was a little funny. Yeah, let's dive into a little bit more of the history on it. So as we've kind of touched on, originally this released October 2nd, 1992. So again, I was 7 and you were 7
9
months.
months old.
9 months, yeah.
January, October,
Other notable releases of the time that I've pulled in here, you have Sneakers, which came out September 11th, which is a movie that I just
I haven't
watched
thought about
like
Sneakers in 20 years. I'll give you that one.
I hadn't either, but I watched it last year, just on a.
Did you really?
Yeah, with a friend of mine. So,
does it hold up?
like no, but I mean it's good, but like
Fair
all
enough.
the tech stuff of it does not hold up. Like David Strathairn is like amazing in that, like playing the blind hacker kind of guy. He's great, and I pulled in here as the note stars Robert Redford, because he has another movie that is featured in this segment where he was directing. So also around this time you had Last of the Mohicans which had come out September 25th. Tom and Jerry the movie came out October 1st. This is like a 2D animated one, and I just was really like taken by that because I remember watching that movie when I was a kid as well, and just the weird cyclical nature of entertainment media, because obviously HBO/Warner just released Tom and Jerry, a CG animated movie in theaters at the same time, Disney is revisiting the Mighty Ducks series. So very weird that, like, just history repeating itself there. You have the Steven Seagal quote-unquote classic, Under Siege, came out October 9th. A River Runs Through It, directed by Robert Redford, came out October 30th. And the last little one I pulled in here was Aladdin, came out November 25th. So,
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can I just say, going through that list and then taking a little peek ahead to where this falls in like the Disney live action timeline. I love doing this show when we do like 90s movies because like obviously like that's what me and you like grew up on to a large extent, and so it's just like, man, I have memories of everything we're saying. Like even like the adult movies, it's like, oh yeah, like that was always in the VHS store. I can tell you where it was at Diamond Video right now, like Lost in the Mohicans and Under Siege and yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's not featured in this segment, but we'll get to it a little bit in some of the cast stuff and some other notes that I've taken. But like, there's also a lot of crossover between this movie and Sandlot, which came out a year later, and just celebrated its 28th anniversary, I think. So it was being shared around Twitter, same as Goofy Movie yesterday. This has a runtime of an hour and 44 minutes. Nice little brisk, kind of runtime there. And as you kind of alluded to, in the Disney live action timeline of things, the lead up to this featured Newsies, which had come out April 10th of 1992 with Christian Bale, which I have done a D+ episode on the musical inspired by the movie, so you can go check that out on the podcast feed. Yeah, both the movie and the musical are the Broadway musical.
That's the one to put in the bank for the future.
Yeah. And then Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, the sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, of course, came out July 17th, 1992. Then this one obviously was next in October of 92. Followed by The Muppet Christmas Carol, which of course we did an episode dedicated to during the holidays a couple months back, so you can go check out a D+ episode on that, which had come out December 11th, 1992. You were not on that one?
I wasn't
right?
on that episode, but I will say that my mom, like all moms do, had like a bunch of like Christmas stuff and like she'd always be playing like Christmas CDs and like music during the holiday season. And she had one that was just like the Muppets doing like Christmas carols, like different Christmas songs. And so a lot of the like classic holiday carols and stuff, I always think of in the Muppets first. And like the big one in particular is
12 Days of Christmas.
Yes, yep. You knew exactly where I was going. It's when whenever I hear that, I'm always doing it in the Muppets' voices every single time in my head. Yeah.
So we have in Phoenix, I imagine this is kind of like a pretty common thing. Every region probably has their own thing, but here in Phoenix, radio station 99.9 KEZ every year basically does nonstop holiday music starting, it used to be like starting, the day after Thanksgiving, but I'm pretty sure in recent years it's been like, hey, starting in November 1st. They just do 2 months of nonstop Christmas music. And I remember like it was always like a fun treat when the Muppet version of 12 Days of Christmas came on, because I hate so many other versions of that song because it just goes on and on and on for forever. Yeah. So the fact that like they recognize that, and by the end they really start like ramping up the speed of it and just it starts going crazy and falling apart and everything, makes it a fun variation of that song. Yeah. The 12 Days After Christmas is another fun one that I remember singing when I was briefly in a Christmas caroling kind of troupe. And it's it's a very much like sardonic kind of like take on the topic. But certainly that was a fun one. And then, we talked about it when we did the Muppet Christmas Carol episode, but like there's just such great music in that series. Even though it is much more, hey, we're going to tell the story of a Christmas Carol, and it just happens to have a few songs that the Muppets are singing in it. In the same way that like Muppet Treasure Island has a few songs, but it's Treasure Island is the story they're telling. which is another one I want to eventually visit on D+. And then the last little one here in the Disney live-action timeline that I pulled in is Homeward Bound: The Incredible Journey came February 3rd, 1993, which of course was like basically like a remake of like another movie that with the same premise of like, oh, like two dogs and a cat going across the country and stuff. But I remember that one so distinctly because Michael J. Fox was the voice of, I think, the cat, or it might have been one of the dogs. I don't remember now.
I thought it was the golden retriever.
It might be, yeah. I mean, he was one of the voices, and
Yeah.
as a fan, like much like you are a fan of anything from '92, I am a huge fan of Back to the Future from the year I was born, 1985.
It's a great year.
And so yeah, like that one was like such a memorable standout from my youth.
It helps that Back to the Future is also a perfect movie.
I mean, yes,
that helps as well. Yeah.
I mean, like, I lucked out when it comes to like the forms of media I really like. In that I have Back to the Future and I have Mario Brothers, the Super Mario Brothers, and the Nintendo.
You also have a pretty
the original
decent James
Nintendo
Bond
release
movie in '85 as well. So yeah.
Which one was that? No,
A View to a Kill.
A View to a Kill. Okay.
Christopher Walken.
There
And
you go.
Grace Jones, actually, now that I think about it.
So the director here we have, diving into the roll call, the director here is Stephen Herrick, who had previously done Critters, as well as Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. So like, a very who's who of like 80s and early 90s films. And then after this, he would go on to do The Three Musketeers, which is another one that I like really enjoyed growing up. I think we talked about this on something where Oliver. Oh, I talked about it on the episode that I did about Tall Tale, which you would have loved to have been on after we've found out after the fact. Because I remember like between Tall Tale and the Three Musketeers, I became like a huge Oliver Platt fan, and then he of course would go on to be Babish in West Wing.
I always think of him as the guy from either Three Musketeers or Tall Tale.
Yeah,
that's even the West Wing is like, oh shit, that's him.
Yep. Stephen Herrick would also go on to do Mr. Holland's Opus, as well as the live-action 101 Dalmatians, and then he's been kind of connected to the MacGyver universe because he did a TV movie. I want to say in like 2003 or something like that called Young MacGyver, and then when the MacGyver character / thing got rebooted into a series not too long ago, he has directed 11 episodes of it since it kind of came back into the forefront.
I will say this. He might be the most accomplished director I've seen yet on the show.
Well, I mean, like, to be fair, a lot of the episodes you've done have just been Disney Channel original movies.
Admittedly, but that's like a legit like filmography with like Critters, Bill and Ted, like this Mighty Ducks, Three Musketeers. Mr. Holland's Opus is like legit film.
Yeah.
And 101 Dalmatians. Like that's a not bad filmography there.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Like let's see. What did he? Was he nominated for anything? No, because I was like, Mr. Holland's Opus might have been nominated.
Richard
for
Dreyfuss
something.
maybe.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, he. I mean, he's definitely had a good run.
That movie's real sad.
Mr. Holland's Opus, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to think if there was anything else that was his that I just didn't pull in here. I mean, like, no, that was pretty much it. Like, he had like a really good run there.
Yeah, the 90s were good to him.
Yeah. What was this one? Man of the House was another one that he did, which was the one where Tommy Lee Jones is
absolutely, yeah. I love that movie.
Yeah. That was his as well.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got to be the best I've seen so far.
As for the writers, we talked about him a little bit last week, but Stephen Brill here was the writer of the original Mighty Ducks trilogy, as well as Heavyweights and another Oliver Platt starring piece, Ready to Rumble. He did that one, as well as the Adam Sandler film Little Nicky. He was the writer on all of those.
Okay, so this is a great episode already, guys. I'm just like how like it's appealing so much to me. So if you don't care about anything from the 90s, I'm sorry, but this is my shit. Ready to Rumble. That's what I was just googling. I fucking love Ready to Rumble, Trevor. I love that movie.
Like I don't think I've ever seen it, or if I've seen it, it was like once back when it originally came out. Because I mean, it came out when I was like into WWE and stuff, but it was very much a WCW movie, so I didn't really like ever associate it with it. And I remember it being like a punchline that like WCW made David Arquette their champion as a tie-in to that whole thing, and is just being like, our champion's The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. You guys got David Arquette as your champion. So yeah, it was like I was very much like Team WWE at the time, but I know Cam, I think, probably has a deep affinity for Ready to Rumble as well. So like at some point maybe we should just do that as like obviously it wouldn't be an episode of this show, but like a That Nerdy Site show, like
I would
Patreon early access episode where the three of us just kind of like watch it on a whim and do like a big old spoiler cast dumb thing of it.
I would love to do that because that's the movie too. Like I didn't have a huge window where I was like really into wrestling. Like it was probably like 3-ish years, like right at the turn of the century kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was that was pretty much the 3 years that like everybody got into wrestling. That was
sure. Yeah,
I mean, that was when I was in there. That was the heyday of Stone Cold and The Rock kind of breaking out and doing their success.
And like this is like right as that was beginning, like really getting hard. And so like, oh, dude, I remember watching movies so much as a kid. Yeah, that'd be a great Patreon spoiler cast.
Yeah.
But anyway, Mighty Ducks.
So yeah, and then and I mentioned Little Nicky, which is another one that I think Cam, when we talked about it last week, Cam was like, "That's like a great Adam Sandler movie." I was like, "You are an idiot," because no, it is not.
That I will not agree with.
As for the starring, really the only repeat name that we have from last week's episode is, of course, Emilio Estevez here as Gordon Bombay. Who I didn't even think to mention, like from last week's episode, iconically from The Breakfast Club. Last week it was just like, oh, he was in the original Mighty Ducks trilogy, and then now he's in Mighty Ducks Game Changers. But of course, yeah, Breakfast Club, St. Elmo's Fire. He was kind of one of the Brat Pack of that era.
So you missed Breakfast Club is maybe the best one he's in, but my favorite Emilio Estevez movie in this list, Trevor, which is Young Guns.
Young Guns.
Young Guns too.
I've never seen it, but yeah, it definitely came up in his IMDb stuff. No, I've never seen Young Guns.
Okay, so forget Ready to Rumble, because that's objectively not as good a movie. We are absolutely doing. I don't know where it's at. We're gonna find out, and like this, peek behind the curtain if we can get it for free somewhere. This week's episode of That Nerdy Site Show we're going to record is going to be me and Trevor doing a spoiler cast of Young Guns. If it's going to be great.
We'll see about that.
That movie is like peak, like Brat Pack. Like it is like every fucking male member of like the late 80s, like Brat Pack or Brat Pack associates all together. And it shouldn't work. And it works really well. And like Brat Pack, like Young Guns to me is a movie that like shouldn't be that great. Like it should be like fun, but it's like it is like so good. Like it's such a great movie, and like a ton of fun. So Young Guns
doesn't appear to be streamable anywhere right now.
Yeah, that's how they get you.
But yeah. So yeah, of course, in addition to Emilio Estevez, I've kind of broken out the cast here in like the adults and then into the kids chunk. So up next in the cast list, we have Joss Ackland playing Hans, who had a pretty good run there in the late 80s, early 90s, doing Lethal Weapon 2 and The Hunt for Red October, as well as Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which I saw somewhere else in like some trivia about him. Like he kind of like holds up as like, I've done some really terrible movies like Bill and Ted's Bogus Adventure. And then he, like, this is another one of those things, like, because the whole trilogy is kind of like grouped together for me, I didn't remember that he's not in D2, but he comes back in D3. And it was one of those things I'm like, wait, isn't he, like, doesn't his character die? Like, aren't they playing, like, in memory of him at some point? And admittedly, again, I've not gone back and rewatched D2 and D3. So I imagine that's probably some kind of point there in D3, but it seems like a Mrs. Landingham kind of thing, but yeah.
I will say, this is about Young Guns. You can watch it free with ads on Amazon, so we'll just put that out there. But no, I think it's something weird. Yeah, like I don't think they kill him off. I think he like goes on a vacation and like he goes somewhere else. Like I think it's something like that. Like I don't think they straight murder him. I mean, yeah,
I didn't think it was like a murder thing, but like, I mean, he's an old guy in this, so
because like the other person's like his cousin or something that comes in afterwards, and like D2 and D3. It's like,
yeah, I don't remember.
I'll Google.
Lane Smith playing Coach Riley here, kind of our big bad guy.
Yeah.
Prior to this, had done My Cousin Vinny, and then right around the same time as this, he did Son-in-Law, the classic Pauly Shore movie. And then I really remembered him, and this came up a little bit when you and I talked recently in our TV shows from our youth. He was Perry White in Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, and like when I saw that on IMDb, I was like, that's where I know him from. That and Mighty Ducks, clearly, but like that being just another thing that he had done. I mean, like a lot of these people are like iconic, kind of like those character actor people that like you've seen in a million things, but these are some choice selections.
If we want the Hans lore, I have it.
Okay. If you had somehow gone back to Young Guns again, I was gonna be like, all right, I think I just got to end this podcast here.
No. So apparently, according to my Google search, Hans
spoilers for D3, by the way,
and D2.
Yeah.
Technically, but not that it. I mean, not that I meant. We might do a D2 podcast. D3 probably less likely. Hans, this is what I thought. He wasn't in D2. He didn't go to the Junior Goodwill Games because he went home for the summer to visit his mom. So shout out to his mom, still kicking it. Especially because in D3, this is a spoiler, Hans suddenly dies. And it's like, that's what I had thought. Like, in D3, Charlie and Gordon have like their whole like thing, because like Gordon's not in D3 that much, like because they go to like a special university and he's like off doing adult stuff.
He goes back to being a lawyer, I think. Yeah, we touched on last week.
But like, Charlie gets in like trouble and has other stuff and everything, and basically Hans dies, and like Gordon comes like visit him. He makes like a big like entrance and like comes to visit Charlie and like talks him through like all the problems he's having in school and stuff like that, and like it is like a turning point in the thing. In D3.
Yeah.
But he's alive in this one.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And in a pretty small role, but like the fact that he gets like second billing, it's like, okay, man, they definitely
it's a little bit like Curly from City Slickers.
Yeah, City Slickers, yeah, there you go. Heidi Kling here playing Casey. Really has not done too much. Her IMDb is pretty sparse. Prior to this, she had done a movie with Matthew Broderick that I'd never heard of called Out on a Limb. Oh. And then, she's another one that was not back for D2, but came back for a small bit role in D3. Joseph Summer here, playing Gerald Ducksworth, of course, who I want to see if you remember who this is, because he is, of course, from The West Wing. From the episode, I will even give you Slow News Day.
I already have his face.
Okay, and he played Senator Steve Gaines. Do you remember who that is in West Wing lore?
Me and Trevor are freaks. Is he the guy who has like, it's like 1 in 3 like White House staffers are on drugs or something like that?
No, he is not that guy. He is the guy Toby puts together and realizes, wait, he's not running for re-election. I think we can make Social Security happen. Yeah, and so he works with Toby on that in that episode.
Yeah,
one of those like iconic, storyline episodes. But yeah, like he's in for one episode. And then he also of note. I mean, he's another one of those guys that is a character actor who's been in like a million things, but those two things jumped out. West Wing, obviously, for our love of that show, and then he was also the president in X-Men: The Last Stand. And then the last one.
Oh, he is.
Yeah. And then the last one I pulled in here, MC Gainey, who plays Lewis, the driver for Gordon. Who was another one of those, like, I'm like, I've seen you in like a million things. Why do I recognize your face? What do I recognize your face from? And it wasn't coming to me until I like dove really deep into his IMDb. But he was in Con Air. He is basically the pilot that Cyrus kind of has ready to go when he takes over the plane. And then he was also Tom Friendly on Lost. And in kind of a recurring role on that show. And then more recently, he was in Django Unchained, probably as...
That's what it is.
I would guess as like one of the shit people in that. I've never seen that. Yeah. And he has been playing the role of the Captain of the Guard in pretty much everything Disney Tangled related. So the Disney movie Tangled, he plays Captain of the Guard. And then he's come back for like a whole bunch of the animated shows and like a lot of like the straight to video stuff. So he just kind of like just another fun little bit there. Moving on to the kids here, we have Joshua Jackson, of course, playing Charlie Conway, who of course would go on to be Pacey in Dawson's Creek, as well as Peter Bishop on Fringe. Eldon Henson here playing Fulton Reed. Would be most notable to a more modern audience as Foggy Nelson from Daredevil and the other Netflix Marvel shows. Sean Weiss here playing Goldberg. Prior to this, had done a few episodes of Pee-wee's Playhouse, and then, of course, would go on to do D2 and D3, as well as Heavyweights. Matt Doherty playing Les Averman is another one. Like, this didn't come up because I didn't catch it at the time, but he was one of the kids in Home Alone. One of the many, many kids in Home Alone. And then I think you're the one that has talked about this, about really loving So I Married an Axe Murderer.
I do.
He is in that. And then, of course, he would also come back for D2 and D3. Brandon Quinton Adams playing Jesse Hall here. As I said earlier, and as I alluded to earlier, would go on to be in The Sandlot as well. He was one of he was the pitcher of the team in The Sandlot. And then, of course, D2 as well. He did not come back for D3, so just D1 and D2. And I think our friend Christian, a.k.a. Pixel Brave, still listens to this show. So if you do, Christian, this one is for you. He also plays the voice of Rai, I believe, in Kingdom Hearts 2, who is basically he is one of the kids in Twilight Town who works with like Cypher as like one of the bad guys, because he's basically a Final Fantasy character from Final Fantasy VIII, Raijin. It's like Raijin and Fujin are like Cypher's sidekick buddies, and Brandon Quinton Adams voiced him in Kingdom Hearts 2. So that is a pulled specifically for Christian if he still listens to the show. Love you, Christian. Hope you're doing well. But also for any other fans of the Kingdom Hearts series.
Kingdom Hearts.
J.D. Daniels playing Peter had a handful of other credits, but really nothing jumped out. This is the only Mighty Ducks movie he's in. He did not return for any of the others. Similarly, Aaron Schwartz playing Carp. This was his debut. He also would not return for any other Mighty Ducks movies, but he was, I'm pretty sure, the main kid in Heavyweights, like a year or two later. And then he had also had a recurring role on The Adventures of Pete and Pete, much like, I'll skip ahead here to Danny Tamborelli playing Tommy, was young Pete in The Adventures of Pete and Pete. He was also in The Adventures of Huck Finn. He was in All That, which if I had remembered that, I would have pointed that out in last week's episode, because Cameron really highlighted the fact that like Kenan Thompson was like the crossover star between Disney and Nickelodeon. It's like, well, I mean, Danny Tamborelli actually did it first because he was in this movie and All That, and Kenan Thompson would not make his Mighty Ducks debut until D2. And then he also is, of course, the kid in Grand Theft Auto 5.
I was gonna say
from a more recent entry. Scrolling back up a little bit, Garrett Ratliff Henson playing Guy Germain was in the 1990 Captain America, which is one of those alongside the, I want to say it was like the 92 or 93 Fantastic Four. It's one of those like, this movie is so bad it's funny kinds of early superhero movies that was made. They were made just to kind of like keep the license alive, I think, by whatever studios. Like they've been like stricken from so many things, but like they're one of those things that like routinely comes up in like, hey, before Captain America there was this Captain America and it was terrible. And he was also in The Adventures of Huck Finn alongside Danny Tamborelli, and I believe, I'm trying to remember, I think Huck Finn was, no, Tom Sawyer was Tom and Huck was the JTT one. Elijah Wood maybe was The Adventures of Huck Finn. I don't remember who Huck Finn was in that one. But it's another one that's on Disney Plus, I'm sure. Anyway, Garrett Radcliffe Henson was also in D2, D3, and Casper. Margaret Moreau, this is one that like I just did not make the connection to, and I mentioned it, I think, in our Slack channel recently. Margaret Moreau playing Connie here also would grow up to be Katie in Wet Hot American Summer. And I probably didn't realize and make that connection because Wet Hot American Summer has never been one of like those movies for me. It's like a cult classic, but it passed me by. But I've seen it a few times, and like making that connection. I was like, holy crap, that is her. So shout out to her. Jane Plank here playing Tammy. The only other thing on her IMDb is that she was an uncredited Christmas caroler in Jingle All the Way. Jussie Smollett playing Terry Hall, younger brother of Jesse Hall, mentioned above.
Jussie Smollett?
Yeah, Jussie Smollett, who of course has had a resurgence of his career in recent years via Empire. Vincent LaRusso playing Adam Banks here. Has really only had like a handful of other miscellaneous roles outside of his returns in D2 and D3. And that, I think, is going to do it for the cast here.
It was Elijah Wood.
Elijah Wood was Huck.
Yeah,
thank you.
Huck, my friend.
Trivia time. You mentioned this a little bit earlier. When the Anaheim Mighty Ducks were added as an expansion team to the National Hockey League, they were named after the movie because the team was owned by Disney. However, prior to the 2005-2006 NHL season, the Ducks dropped Mighty from their name and are now known as the Anaheim Ducks.
Boo!
This is a thing that blew my mind in watching. Like the Connie turning into Katie from What Hot American Summer. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Eldon Henson, who plays Fulton, and Garrett Ratliff Henson, who plays Guy, are brothers. Never knew that. Like, never realized those two actors were brothers in this movie. But Eldon had to dye his hair and change his name so he would be cast as Fulton, apparently. So yeah, just never. I mean, like, because he is credited as something other than Eldon Henson. But yeah, it's just one of those things of I see it now when I watch it with that knowledge, but yeah, never would have put that together. Adam Banks is often referred to as a cake eater. This term is actually well known throughout Minnesota and refers to people who live in the city of Edina, a suburb of Minneapolis. A cake eater is saying a person who is so rich they can have their cake and eat it too. And then
that's pretty good.
Yeah. This ties into, I don't know if you've watched the TV show, but I touched on it last week. Obviously, cake eater, a recurring insult thrown around in this series. In the debut episode of Game Changers, Gordon Bombay is running like a down on its luck ice rink, where he is multiple times throughout the episode seen eating cake that is like leftover from kids' birthday parties, that he just is eating the leftovers. So he has quite literally become a cake eater after many, many years ago. Terry and who was the other one? I've lost it. Terry and Jesse called him cake eater. Anyway, last little bit of trivia here that I have is both Sean Weiss and Aaron Schwartz, a.k.a. Goldberg and Karp, starred together in Heavyweights, which also starred Kenan Thompson, who would enter the series in the next two entries as Russ Tyler. Nice little, tying it all together.
Kenan Thompson's career is so long.
It is, right? Yeah, crazy. We again... Me and Cam talked at length a little bit about the show last week, and we talked a little bit about how the movie holds up and stuff as well. But how do you think the movie holds up all these years later? Here, almost 30 years after it originally came out here, Logan.
So I'll admit upfront my bias, right? I love the movie and I love the Mighty Ducks series, but I really do think it holds up really well. I think it is a ton of fun, right? I think this movie skates a really fine line between cheesy and goofy and silly and serious and triumphant sports moment thing, and does it really well, right? This movie kind of has a few different spinning plates, and I wouldn't be shocked if it didn't handle some of them great, if it dropped a few of them, but it really doesn't for me, right? I think it really does hit the beats it wants to hit really well. I think it's a blast to watch again. I'm watching it again. And Trevor watch it twice in a week, right? I think there is something to this movie, right? I think it does just kind of have some sort of magic to it. And Trevor actually gave me my favorite way to describe the movie to some degree, which is it does what people always talk and think about Karate Kid and how it tells that story, but it does it better. and it actually like pays off the end of the movie in a way that the first one doesn't. And I just think that
and it even has its own it's almost aware of the fact that it's got a Karate Kid vibe to it, because they make a reference to the Karate Kid when of course Bombay is like teaching them how to like handle a puck by using eggs and stuff like that instead.
Yeah,
non-conventional teaching methods.
It is just, I think, a great movie, right? Like I think legitimately it is a great film. It is one of my favorite movies, and I think it's one of my favorite sports movies as well, precisely because it understands that good sports movies are about the people, and it spends so much time invested with Charlie and Goldberg and all the other kids, but also Bombay, who is the heart of the movie ultimately.
Yeah.
And his growth and his arc and his relationships with the other kids, and then in particular kind of that trinity of Charlie, Hans, and the Hawks head coach, right? And like that kind of triad of people and how he kind of interacts with each one of them, I think pays off so well. I could talk all day long about how cool and interesting and like how much psychological heft they give to the Hawks storyline with Gordon. Everything with like his dad to the coach and that whole dynamic, right? Like in the first 20 minutes, it's like, hey, like win this for us. I mean, that's the movie begins. Win it for us. Don't let me and all your teammates down. Then it shows it again like 15 minutes in and goes like, also your dad is dead. Don't let him down either. And then we get into the movie and it's like, damn, all right. Like, and it could be like super heavy-handed and over the top, but I really don't think it is. And I think part of it helps the fact that like Emilio Estevez is a legitimately talented, great actor. So like he can pull it off, and he can pull off being kind of crazy and like frenzied like he is in something like Young Guns, and also be really serious and just be a great actor like he is in Young Guns, but also a lot of his other films, like Breakfast Club, for example, where he's much more restrained. And I think he threads that really well in this role as well, where he is kind of swinging back and forth between those two different, I think, spectrum roles that he can play so well.
Yeah, you mentioned it was one of the. This is not an IMDb trivia thing, but I saw this on the Wikipedia page. It was nominated in 2008 in AFI's 10 Top 10, which was a series that like looked at 10 film genres and like identified the top 10 movies in those film genres. So it was nominated in the sports film genre there.
It's great
as a great kind of standout for that. Yeah, I talked about this a little bit last week, but so some of the newer thought elements that I think I have are like, yes, I definitely think it does, and especially I touched on last week, like making that connection to the Karate Kid now that I have seen the Karate Kid, which I had never seen kind of prior to this growing up. Like it very much kind of is that template. I mean, it's also like, you know, heavily influenced by something like the Bad News Bears and stuff like that. It's, you know, a crappy team coming together with like a kind of crappy coach that like they improve each other's lives and all that stuff. And like seeing that, like there are elements I think work really, really well like that. And then there are elements I'm just like, I don't know why this is in there. Like we started talking a little bit before we started recording, like the whole introduction to the kids where they are like pulling a prank on somebody by like they go through the whole convoluted plot of like feeding a dog beans or something like that. The dog craps. They put the poop in a purse with like a dollar thing kind of, and like it's the whole thing to set up, and then like the payoff is a farcical runaway fast action sequence with the kids escaping while the guy like chases them down, and ends with like a nut shot of him falling on a plank and doing like oh kind of like reaction,
falling in the mud,
and it's just like the only thing like in terms of like the larger plot that serves is like, hey, these kids kind of suck too. Like they're potentially, you know, bad kids, not just, you know, a bad sports team or a bad hockey team kind of thing. Like they're hoodlums and they're hooligans kind of thing as well. But like it just, for me, that sequence is like so tonally disparate. Like you could cut that out and I don't think you lose anything.
It is definitely the most
movie.
jarring scene in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it especially going off of that like little bit of trivia of like, oh, the movie used to be darker, but then leaned into more humor and comedy and stuff. Like that strikes me as like, oh, that's like a Disney note saying like, hey, add in a funny sequence. That's basically just a live action cartoon sequence from a Looney Tunes bit or something like that. So like there are things like that like feel weird and out of place, but overall like it does a pretty good job, I think, of kind of, yeah, I think like it, I mean, in terms of like holding up, I think it does well. One of the other notes that you touched on that I want to kind of jump off of is you touched on like the iconic kind of like, swelling score music kind of thing. Like, and I made the note when I was rewatching it right before we started recording, like when Charlie scores that goal at the end on the penalty shot, I was like, whoever did the score for this is like had like a really great like triumphant sound cue. There's triumphant music. So I looked it up. This was David Newman, who is another one of those connections to The Sandlot because he would go on to do the music for The Sandlot as well. But then he's also like, I mean, he's got like a big old a big old resume on IMDb. It's interesting because this ties in weirdly to Kind of Funny is doing Pixar in review, and they recently did Finding Nemo, which was scored by another Newman, but like Randy Newman is even a recurring gag on that. And Tim talked in that episode about like the Newman dynasty, and that like there's a long lineage of Newman score composers and stuff like that. And David is one of that family basically. And he also did stuff like Galaxy Quest is another one of his that like jumps out to me as like he really, he can really nail that like big bombastic triumphant like overcoming all odds kind of score. Great, yeah. So yeah, those are a couple things that jumped out at me as well. But yeah, like it's just a fun movie, especially when like the team starts gelling and when you see when you have those like montage moments. Like I think maybe a few things are like an extra hurdle that probably doesn't need to be in there. Like the one I took note of this second time watching it is when Bombay is like yelling at Riley about like after he has gotten, basically after he's like played the legal card and said like Adam Banks should be playing for our team, and like he says like, yeah, my team's a whole bunch of losers, they don't even deserve to live, and blah blah blah, and like the kids overhear that sequence and that leads to their like disconnect from him because they don't understand sarcasm and they don't understand that he's trying to make a point that like Riley's a dick. Like that is, I think, an unnecessary complication to the plot, but I let it slide because it gives us the fun sequence of like them all fighting in the classroom and then like coming together as a team as a result. And then he has that like he comes to see them in detention kind of thing, and that like reconciles everything. So it's like I think it could have been handled cleaner and a little bit better. But ultimately, like the ends justify enough of the means that I'm fine with it. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things that like definitely jumped out at me. And yeah, it's. I mean, I touched on this I think again with Cam last week, but like the thing I forget about when I think about this movie is like the Gordon stuff. Like I forget that the first opening of the movie is his tragic backstory of loving hockey as a kid, and then his dad dying, and he misses that penalty shot, and his team loses in overtime, and that devastates him, and he like that it haunts him to this day, and then the whole like thing of him being an ambulance chaser kind of lawyer guy, like he's not a likable character, but like because he becomes likable and like and that's like your lasting impression of him in this, let alone in D2, like that's my memory of him more so than like the first half hour of this movie. Is that like plus like I'm sure there's some subtle like, oh, I like him in Breakfast Club, even though he starts out as a jerk in Breakfast Club too. Like it's just, hey, Emilio Estevez, a very charming guy, and so he can definitely pull that off, and I don't think of him as like the jerk character that he is. Any favorite moments that jump out to you?
Yeah, I have a lot actually. So like it's not a moment, but it's like moments. Like I really do like Han's character a lot. Mm-hmm. Like I love his basically like surrogate father relationship with Gordon.
Yeah.
I think it works really well. And again, like if she like rechecking up on D3 and like seeing how it pays off in that movie, where like his death and that movie is what brings Charlie back in D3 too, like the whole just like trilogy arc of like him being a surrogate father to Gordon, who is a surrogate father to Charlie, and then like that
because he's the
his,
good
like,
surrogate
past and
father,
bringing it together.
Yeah, because
and,
like the
like,
other surrogate father that Bombay had,
Sure,
of course, was
is
Coach Riley, and
Hawks
we
coach,
just
yeah.
see how much of a dick he is throughout the entire movie. So like it's good that like it's Gordon's
he had
two
another good
dads,
influence.
Gordon's three dads.
Yeah, and I liked that. Like I think when I was looking for like what happens to him later on, I had a like Chive article pop up of like Gordon's like Yoda in the movie, like Ice Yoda basically, and I was like, that's pretty good. So yeah, I mean, like I love his character. I think he works really well. Everything about the Hawks are just so gloriously evil, and I love it, and especially in the context of I just saw a Twitter like thread today that I know I liked. I might have retweeted too, about how like you don't have to make assholes have tragic backstories. Like assholes can just be assholes. Like people can just be bad. You don't need to like every like it was like writers. You don't have to make every like evil person have like some tragic backstory.
Is this
like,
in response to like Cruella? Because that's what it sounds
I don't
like.
know what
It sounds
was.
like it's in response to the upcoming Cruella de Vil movie.
It was from today, so I think it was just a blanket thing, but it fits there too, right? Like, but I feel like it's just like
Cruella had like
modern,
a new trailer
like,
drop yesterday, I think. So.
Oh, but I feel like it's just like, you know, in the wake of like Tony Soprano onward, the last 2 decades basically have just been like every villain's got to be like an anti-hero instead.
Yeah.
And there's none of that here. They're just deliciously evil for no reason. Not only do they want to win every game, what's the point of winning if you can't win big? There's lots of other points of winning. To win is the point, not to do it evilly, but like it's just so it's such a deliciously just like sinister line for no reason, and I love it.
Yeah.
There's no point in winning if you can't win by 50. It's like, all right, well, I disagree, but it's great.
When I was taking down notes in the final game, when he's like, "I want you to take Banks out. I want you guys to take Banks out of this game." My note was, Crab and Goyle take out Banks, but he still manages to get the goal. Because that's basically what those two kids are. It's Crab and Goyle before Crab and Goyle were a thing.
It's just great. Like they're just so bad, and it's great, right? Like I think, especially like in a kids movie, like part of me really just loves the simplicity of like, yeah, they just suck. Like I don't need to know any more than that. Like they just are shitty, and it's great to watch them be shitty. Like especially again, I was rewatching the movie before I started recording, and I paused it midway through the first game between the Hawks and the Ducks, just kicking the shit out of them for no reason, like just obliterating these kids, like smashing them into the boards, all this other stuff, and it's like for no reason, and it's great. Like I love it. I
didn't pull it in because it's a little more convoluted or anything, but like one of the little bits of trivia was somebody basically like realizing or kind of making the case that for the most part, the Ducks that end up beating the Hawks at the end are the same Ducks that lose 17-0 in that first game. Because after Banks gets taken out and after Fulton gets basically taken out for unsportsmanlike conduct or whatever, like it's the original team. It's the same kids, just now with more confidence and a little more skill and more teamwork and stuff. So the fact that not only they keep the Hawks to a low scoring game, but then ultimately also get the win. It's like, hey, yeah, that is like a weird, more subtle element of like their growth as a team. They can't just be completely squashed.
I also think that there is, especially in that dynamic that you just said. Obviously, this is a sports movie, and it's a really smart sports movie and a really subtle sports movie, like you just said, where like it's the same team. And I also wonder if there isn't a little bit of, I would argue, the most famous hockey thing ever, right, is the Miracle on Ice from the 1980 Olympics. And that one, too, the U.S. team played the Russians in, like, the opening rounds and got the shit kicked out of them. Like, they got just demolished by the Russians. And then they obviously played each other later on and won famously, and it's the same team, right? And I think I love that symmetry, too. Again, like, hockey's most famous upset, and then you see the Pee Wee version of that basically, and the sequel, basically the Olympic version of that too.
Yeah.
And
it came up a little bit last week because it like one of the first lines in the Game Changers TV show is basically like setting the stage and like, hey, this team is a state championship led team. These aren't the team of the 90s. Those Ducks used to quack. Ha 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 ha. How stupid they were. And I remember I basically made the note of like, that's pretty dismissive of a team that went off and like, went and won the Junior Olympics or whatever it was.
Yeah, like
and
gold medal.
Like my snarky line from last week was like they went and saved us from war with Iceland or whatever it was. Basically drawing that analog of the Miracle on Ice kind of. Like,
to say nothing of like stopping like a 14-time defending like state Pee Wee champion team too. Like they also beat those guys. I like pretty good. I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I love that too. Right. Like the movie is a really good sports movie, and I think it understands that really well, and it has like a respect of hockey that I think a lot of the best sports movies do, right? Like to me, obviously, when I think of like great sports movies, I also think of legitimately The Sandlot, which has such a deep like love, like so clearly of baseball, and like what makes that sport special. And I think this one, you see it in Gordon himself, who like rediscovers that love of hockey. Like it just clearly likes hockey, and it clearly like enjoys that sport. Not maybe to the level that like The Sandlot clearly just loves the sport, but like still does. And I think that feeds through into the movie, into the characters, and that's one of the things that I've always really liked about the movie too. And watching it twice now, I find myself really enjoying as well. Even if the stakes are absolutely like soap opera-esque, it's comical. Like I did have the again watching it again tonight, I was just like, they're putting this like 9-year-old boy on fucking blast for missing this goal. Like as he falls to his knees and like the spotlight drops and the announcer goes like, oh, I don't know how he's ever gonna get over that loss, that missed goal. That's a terrible blow. And it's like, this kid's like 9. Leave him alone, kid. Like, Jesus.
And it's definitely it's another thing that I like. As many times as I've watched this movie, I don't think I got it until I was looking in the IMDb trivia thing of like, that doesn't lose them the game in that original flashback. Like Gordon says later that he missed the shot which could have won the game for them, but they end up losing in overtime. So it's like the rest of the team failed as well. It's not just on him, but he clearly has like held that on him, and Coach Riley has,
because he could have won it.
There's that shot of like, that one year we were second place in 1973.
I just saw that scene again. Yeah,
he's like, oh, I wish they would take that one down. And it's like, shut up, dick. Like the real.
It is weird to have that one yellow banner, I will acknowledge, but like nonetheless, it is just like, all right, you're just being an asshole now.
Also, second place in a state championship is still pretty dang good. Like you see national sports teams hold their like Western region champion or whatever. Like so what, they didn't win the full thing. Like it's still something to celebrate.
I do love that whole. Like, and again, that one's like very fresh in my mind, which is why. But like that whole first conversation, but basically a confrontation between the two coaches is great because of how quickly it just becomes a snarky, like passive aggressive. It's like, oh, did you come, Gordon? You look great. Like, did you come here to see your old coach? And he was like, well, actually, I am the coach. And then in that instant, the other guy's like, I'm gonna fuck you up. Like, and he just starts like being super passive aggressive for no reason. Like Gordon's just like standing there being like, yeah, I'm the coach, and he just like takes a bat to this, like to Bombay, and it's great. Again, like he's just such a good villain. Like out of the 3 Mighty Duck movies, he is the best villain that you're going to face. It also upset like there's a lot of again like the psychological shit here.
There's a personal backstory there, personal history.
But it's so good. He also just like chews up the scenes he's in. Like he's great in My Cousin Vinny, and he's great in this. Like 1990s, early 90s was great for this actor.
Yeah. And Lois and Clark, he was good in that too.
Yeah, and Lois and Clark. I won't. Yeah.
So one of the things I wanna, I don't know how you feel about this, but one of the things that, especially watching it these last couple times, that like I think about, especially I guess in the context of watching the TV show now, which is very like focused around like this group of like 7 or 8 kids, it seems, and we're going to get like 10 episodes telling their story. I do feel like there are probably a few too many kids in this, so much so that like some of them just don't have anything to do. They don't have a thing. Which like I mean like I think of Peter, for example, in this, and I think of like one of the is it Terry? Like Terry, I think, is the one that's always calling Adam cake eater, and then Jesse's just kind of like his younger brother or something like that, and he doesn't really have a thing either. Like
they basically needed a hockey team, so just had to have some extra guys.
Like, Charlie is like the heart kind of thing. Fulton is like, you know, the big imposing thing. Goldberg is the smart alecky, you know, goalie, and then Averman is just Rob Schneider's character from that SNL sketch. And that's and like even Connie and Guy are like, oh, they're like the couple, but like that's not a huge aspect of this movie. It's like they're in the background of a couple scenes or something like that, but that their relationship I think more becomes a thing in later. And then like
the later ones,
you know, you have Tammy and Tommy who are like the figure skaters, but even that is like a one bit thing. And so it's just like there's just a little too many kids, I think, to and not all of them get like their moment to shine.
I think that's fair.
I would say there's like a moment designed for each of them, but like in Carp's case, for example, it's his head stops the puck or whatever, and then he's just like out like a light, and that's his moment in this thing. Like he doesn't have really much outside of that, and so like that's I think my really biggest gripe with it is that I think a movie, if it were made now, would probably cut one or two of the kids so that every other kid gets a little bit more time to breathe, and a little bit more of a thing. Or it would be like, okay, here are like the 5 or 6 kids that you care about, and then it would be like that thing from like Glee or Pitch Perfect even, where it's like, oh, there are a few other people that are in all of those scenes, but like the fact that we don't know them and they aren't like their own characters becomes a joke in and of itself. Like, there's I think in particular of like the Pitch Perfect trilogy of movies where it's like there's 2 or 3 girls that are in all of the movies, and by the time the third movie comes around, they're like, no, we've been here the whole time. like, but they're not your Rebel Wilson, they're not your Anna Kendrick, they're not like your mainstays. They're just there to fill out the cast and fill out the stage, basically. And so I think like having a few people to fill out the team, even if we don't spend time with them, is fine because they already feel a little shortchanged in this as a result.
It's definitely that thing of, and like Little Giants is another one, like the football movie basically with Rick Moranis, but it's
I know Little Giants. That's another one. Like Little Giants, Mighty Ducks, Sandlot were like staples of my childhood.
Absolutely,
despite me not really being a crazy sports kid.
And I was a huge this is these movies are but
Rick Moranis and Ed O'Neill, of course, you gotta love Little Giants.
Yeah, Ed O'Neill, absolutely.
The Icebox.
I think the Sandlot got lucky in one way, which is the fact that like baseball doesn't have subs really. Like these are just like the 9 kids, and so like that's it. You don't have to have like anybody filled out. Whereas in hockey, in particular, like they're constantly doing line changes, so you need to just have people who are like who can be on the ice space. You just need to have a team.
Yeah.
And even in like Little Giants, a football team is huge too. So like you just need to have a bigger cast, and so it becomes harder. Obviously, the more people you add to give everyone their own moment. And I think Mighty Ducks tried to do this again, a balance of filling out the team, just having enough people, while also being like, we want to try to give everyone at least like a moment of like why they're here. But it's hard in a movie that's an hour and 40 minutes long, where the main character isn't even any of the kids. Yeah. It's their adult coach.
Yeah.
I think they mostly manage it fine.
And I think we like ultimately we see, you know, some of these kids don't come back for the sequel. And then, like, you know, I mean, there's like a whole big thing about like these are the 5 new teammates that come in D2. I remember, like, and so they're all introduced with their thing. You have the guy that like swings the lasso,
the cowboy. Yeah.
You have the other Bash brother. You have the you know one of the girls or something like that. I don't remember, but like each of them is introduced with like their thing to like say, hey, they're the new people on the team. I mean, like even Kenan Thompson gets like his moment in the sun out doing the knuckle puck. That's another thing I remember like the knuckle puck being so iconic with this that like when that's not in this movie, I'm like, that's like where's the knuckle puck?
A lot of the stuff is from the second one.
Yeah, exactly, and that's like something Cam and I talked about last week. And another thing we talked about last week is in the TV show, there's a whole thing of like, hey, all you need for a team is 6 players and a coach. And like I remember saying like that seems like way too few people. at the same time, like I like it because I can focus more on those 6 players. But yeah, Cam kind of introduced me to the idea of like, yeah, there's line changes. So you could do a 6-person team, but then you're going to be really screwed because nobody on your team gets a break. Like you don't get to hop off the ice.
Die at the end of the game. Yeah.
Which seems to be where they're going with the show anyway. But yeah, so I got like a little bit of a history lesson last week in hockey as well. Any other great? Yeah, I'm sure Jazz would easily be able to kind of fill in some insight on that as well. Any other moments that you want to give some love to, give a shout out to?
I think the moments between Bombay and Charlie's mom are actually really good.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the chemistry, right? Like it's not a moment, but it won't really fit in either area. But it's just Bombay's arc. Again, I feel like we have such different kind of memories of Mighty Ducks. Like so much of the movie to me is Emilio Estevez. Like I identify him so much with this franchise, and so it's
probably like because when I first saw it, I was 7 years old and identifying with the kids who were a couple years older than me. Because it's like
which is totally
like
fair.
Those are me versus like you're seeing it a little bit out of time, and so you've got a different kind of perspective coming into it.
But yeah, like I love his arc. He's got so many quiet moments. His growth, I think, is really well paid off, and kind of the classic I'm a bad guy and now I'm good thing. I think this is one of the better ones in kid movies, and better ones than just in general. I mean, Emilio Estevez is a great actor.
Yeah.
From a great family. And so, yeah, I mean, I think he just is the hardest movie and gives it so much heart. And in particular, I'm a sucker for quiet moments. He's got so many great small quiet moments throughout the film with different characters that I think elevate the movie from your standard Little Giants kind of thing.
Yeah. One of the aspects I really love is when he shows up at the law office and he's like, oh hey, they get you, I see you got your jersey, awesome, and then sees that the coach and Adam Banks' dad are there, and he just kind of mumbles sir, they're the bad guys. That's a great little moment, basically saying hey, this is what the audience knows. The audience doesn't want them to be here, so why is our benefactor of the Ducks, why is he supporting them? And I think he has a great little moment there where he stands up and basically says, all right, fire me, fine. But I'm not going to, bail on these kids. Is a great, I mean, that's a great turning point for the character. Who
again, early in the movie was I
hate kids.
Is my life, right?
Yeah, work is my life. I hate kids. They're barely people, I think he says.
Yeah.
And there's another element. I love the montage of them at the North Stars Arena, because I made the it's part montage, part just seemingly outtakes. There's a shot in there in particular where he skates into frame and then falls, and then the camera just catches him and he's just laughing his ass off at having fallen or something like that, and Lewis behind him is laughing, and they're just that is a sequence that doesn't need to be in the movie, but it shows them having so much fun and how they have bonded as a team together, I think. So it really, really supports kind of, the whole rest of the nature of things going on there. I think I made the note, Coach Riley is just John Kreese, but in an ice rink. John Kreese, of course, from Karate Kid and Cobra Kai. And yeah, Bombay obviously has a great arc in this, and I think it pays off. It's interesting then seeing where he is now in the TV show, because he's basically back to being I hate kids and no hockey and I hate hockey and all this stuff. And so it's okay, what happened between maybe D3 and now that led you to hating this all again? But even in the second episode, you already see him getting back on the ice and starting to maybe. I mean, basically, he seems to be doing his same arc from the movie, but now stretched out over a series, perhaps. And so we'll see, how that plays out, I'm sure. It didn't take me until watching it the most recent time, so basically right before we started recording, I never picked up on the Oreo line phrase of
I didn't either.
the hulls and ghee in there as
Yeah.
as the cream filling, basically. So even watching it last week, I didn't pick up on that. It's one of those things that's like it almost crosses a line of like awkward uncomfortableness, especially in a 2021 kind of age. But I think it's like innocent enough, and they own it. They own kind of what they are in a way that I think I'm okay with. But yeah, it's just one of those like, ooh, that's like, oh, that's what they're saying. Okay, yep, Oreo line. Oh, all right, okay. Also, I defer to you on this because I don't know hockey, but I feel like Tammy's pirouette would get called for high sticking, right? Wouldn't she? Because she's like spinning with the stick, like with the hockey stick up at like chest height. So
that's a great point. Again, I would defer to Jazz or Cam, who know it better than I do, but from the limited amount of hockey that I know of, I would also say that certainly something about that doesn't seem legal.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like it is absolutely a lovely, charming film. Oh, another element that I just completely had forgotten prior to like rewatching it is the whole story beat about them cheating, and like him trying to turn them into cheaters and like take the hits and all that stuff. And I basically made the moment like what an ambulance chaser kind of move, like what a shady skeezy lawyer kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely a solid film. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any last moments? Anything else you want to weigh in on before we grade it?
No, I mean, I love The Mighty Ducks. It is one of my favorite movies as a kid. It has a very special place in my heart. I love this series. I love a lot of the characters. Gordon Bombay is one of those like, adult figures I looked up to as a kid. And yeah, it forms this really interesting like trinity of like this Sandlot and Little Giants, and like maybe like Rookie of the Year, I guess too.
Yeah.
Which I just
Angels
saw on
in the
TV
Outfield.
the other day, actually. Angels in the Outfield with Danny Glover. Yeah. Like it formed like the early '90s were a good period if you liked sports, or even if you didn't like sports, but like for sports movies, that were like actually like legitimately good and not just like, oh, okay, it's Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off, like good sports movie. I don't want to be like we should on Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off too much, but like, you know what, like there's got to be a villain in every podcast, and that's our villain. And so I think that like it was such a cool period in time, and like again, as someone who was born and grew up like going back and watching these movies again, like they did form like a lot of my earliest ideas and memories and understandings of these sports, right, were from watching these films. And so yeah, like it was a great era. I love the movie. I love the 90s, obviously. Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. We'll get to the grading, but I love Mighty Ducks.
Yeah. So it's time for the report card where we grade it from A+ to F. What do you give this one?
I mean, this is an A for me. Yeah. I mean, I think I acknowledged it early on. I'm biased, all that other stuff, yada yada yada. But I think it is legitimately a great movie and a ton of fun, and I think it definitely holds up as an enjoyable movie to watch again in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, like my quibbles aside are all like minor, so it's definitely in like A minus kind of territory. I caught another one of my notes that is like the that I wanted to like circle back to when you were like, oh, you love the relationship between Gordon and Charlie's mom. When she's like, oh yeah, like I remember growing up dreaming like that was an ice palace and that was my room, and then I gave Charlie that room, and Gordon's like, well, where's my room? Like I want to live there too. It's like, this is your first date, dude. That's a lot to throw at her. And like I think she has the appropriate response of like, what are we doing here? And he's like, what, do I have to like till death do us depart on a first date? It's like, you're the one that started this, Gordon. Like you don't get to like be indignant now that she's called you out on it. Like but that's such a minor thing. It's just like whatever, it's fine. So yeah, I think it's a solid A for me as well.
One thing I forgot to say too earlier on, is it's not that. Oh, that's a good one. Is I think there are we've made a lot of like the Karate Kid connection here, and I think for me in particular, and for you for different reasons, is like this is kind of our Karate Kid, right? Like I obviously wasn't born when Karate Kid came out, and you would have been like
me neither.
It
predates me by a year.
Okay, yeah. So neither one of us were alive when they came out, right? And like you were 7, I was born the year this movie came out, and it is one of my earliest film. Like I was probably like 3 or 4 when I watched it. I was probably arguably too young, but it is one of my earliest film memories, and so it is kind of the movie that like we watch and be like, oh yeah, and then we probably watch Karate Kid and we're like, oh yeah, it's like the Mighty Ducks, yeah, like they have like the dickish guy too, especially for you who didn't watch Karate Kid for another 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like a lot of the beats that people kind of identify with Karate Kid, we identify here, I identify here. And it is like in the same way that the Karate Kid is like a quintessentially like 80s ass movie. This to me is like, oh, this is a 90s. Just like the way they're dressed when you first see the kids, I'm like, this is a 90s ass movie. And I love it as someone who like, loves the 90s. It is that for kind of 90s kids.
Yeah. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. Largely the same list from last week's show, of course, the Game Changers.
Yeah, I would imagine.
First 5 entries are the exact same. You have D2, The Mighty Ducks, D3, The Mighty Ducks.
Good movie.
Mighty Ducks, Game Changers, whereas in last week's episode it was, of course, this movie. Mighty Ducks, the animated series. Miracle, which you mentioned earlier, the movie based on the Miracle on the Ice.
I didn't know that was on D+. That's a great movie. Kurt Russell.
Yep. And then the 3 new ones that replace from last week's Safety, High School Musical, the musical, the series, and Ice Princess. The 3 new ones are more in the like film inspired by, and that's hence this list. You have Remember the Titans, of course, another one of these kinds of movies of like sports team coming together. Invincible, which I believe is
another good movie. Mark
Wahlberg, yeah, there you go. And The Game Plan, which I don't remember who was in that one, but The Game Plan. So yeah, you watching anything else on Disney Plus these days, Logan?
I'm gonna watch the rest of this movie after we finish recording, and then I am gonna watch D2 probably this weekend as well. Honestly, now that I know that's on D Plus, maybe I'll watch Miracle. Miracle is like a legitimately great movie. That movie's so good. Kurt Russell's great. So I might just commit to like a hockey weekend and watch D2 and Miracle because D2 cause it's fun. Miracle because like it is actually a great movie and that story is like the Miracle on Ice is like crazy in its own right, and then like when you like watch or read about like the actual story in like learn more like how they got there, it's just even more crazy. Like it is truly absurd that this ragtag bunch beat just a team that had dominated the sport for like decades. Again, including after getting beat down in their first matchup at that same Olympics. Yeah, it is a great movie. So but otherwise,
speaking of Kurt Russell, we at some point, I remember we talked about it. I want to say we talked about it like when I was out there back around the That Nerdy Site launch. The idea of Sky High, which was not on Disney Plus at that time, but I just checked. I was like, it was one of those that like was coming whenever its deal with wherever it was ended. It is now on Disney Plus, so I feel like that's one that I believe Jazz had some thoughts on that too. So I think that'll be a fun one to do like a big group show on, a la what we did for like Brink and stuff.
I'm sure Cam probably has thoughts on that too. If I had to know Cam, Sky High is great. Yeah. I really hope Sky High like holds up well. From what I've heard people talk about it, like it seems like it has, but like I really want the movie to be good still.
I mean, I remember a bunch of people watched it at like one of the Kind of Funny events like 3 or 4 years ago and like really loved it and really enjoyed it. So I think it holds up fine. But yeah.
I feel like that's a movie that's like ahead of its time in some ways too, because it was like in a weird like almost like not a fallow period, but like before super movies like really exploded in the same way.
Yeah, I mean it's I want to say it's like 2005, so that's what the same year that like Batman Begins came out, I think. So like it is
Fantastic Four. I think like the first or second one came out around that time too. So like it's.
It predates like Marvel, and so now with everybody kind of understanding superheroes via the Marvel universe, I'm sure it has you can see it through a different lens, I'm sure. But anyway, in terms of what I've been watching extracurriculars, I of course have been continuing to watch the Game Changers show, which is just like it's a charming, it's this kind of story,
Is
but
it
with a new
weekly?
batch of kids. Yeah, it's a weekly show for 10
Maybe I'll
episodes.
get into
So
that too.
first 2 episodes are out. The third one will come out tomorrow or today if you are listening this the day it comes out. And then of course, Falcon and Winter Soldier is halfway through its run.
Right.
So I'm enjoying that as well. I think that's it. The new trailer for High School Musical, the musical series season
saw
2
you tweet that
dropped
out,
today. And I'm looking forward to that. I think that's like a couple weeks away or something at this point. So that'll be another fun one to get back in the groove of. But yeah, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Logan, for joining me to talk about the Mighty Ducks. It was definitely one of those like, well, we did talk about Mighty Ducks a lot last week, but I can go another week talking about Mighty Ducks. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give a shout out to, give some love to, Logan?
I'll give a shout out to last week's podcast. I wasn't on it, but it sounds like a lot of fun. I love the Mighty Ducks. It's a great film series. And then I will give a shout out to mine and Trevor's It Takes Two Let's Play series. In particular,
Part 3.
episode 3, yeah, that went live today as a recording, yesterday when this goes live.
Yep.
Okay. Really granular, mine and Trevor's tweets about it today. I really enjoyed both of our tweets and our story of Moon Baboon and him just being utterly screwed over. Who knows? Maybe It Takes Two will have a redemptive arc similar to the Mighty Ducks and will come out being redeemed citizens. But right now, that does not seem to be the case. And the one good character we've met, we just screwed over just repeatedly.
Yep.
But it's been a lot of fun playing that. I really enjoyed it. And so go over to youtube.com/thatnerdysite and go check that out. Get us to 250 subscribers. That was our monthly goal for March. I think it's doable.
Yeah, I think we were like at
God, it's April.
I think we're at like no. I mean, it was our goal. Like for 250 is our goal for the end of April. That we set like 3 days ago on the other podcast.
I think we can do it.
Oh yeah, like I want to say we were at like 239 when I like uploaded that episode. So
get it.
Yeah.
So
There we go. Subscribe there. I will echo that, and I will also tease a bonus let's play that's going to come out Saturday this week. So tomorrow, if you're listening to this the day this episode goes live, I won't tease what it is, but I will tease that it has probably as I the same way I teased it to the team as well as I think to Twitter. It has possibly my favorite thumbnail I've ever made for any of the things we've done for That Nerdy Site. But yeah, it's going to be a fun let's play that I think that will tie into other content we have coming up on the site. So check that out. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel for that. Yeah, that is going to do it. So once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, click the notification bell so you know when all of our new videos go live here on YouTube. Do all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon, patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Helps keep the lights on, helps kind of cover the costs for the site for podcasts like this. Thank you again, Logan, for joining me. Thank you, audience, for joining us to talk about Mighty Ducks. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other. Class dismissed.